Hey everyone, this is George and Buke from METALHEADS Podcast. We are here today with Mike Conte from Early Man. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Since there might be some listeners that are not familiar with Early Man, could you maybe start us off with a little bit of band history?
Yeah, the band is it's actually been around, at least in my own mind, for about 20 years. It started with me in, I want to say, maybe the mid 90s, doing 4-track recordings with anybody who was around in that era might remember the amazing Tascam 4-track recorder.
I still have one of those.
Yeah, they're great. They actually still sound good for some stuff. But as soon as and also any guitar player will know this, as soon as the pod was invented, the first generation, I lived in Ohio. I'm originally from Ohio, Marion, Ohio, technically, but moved to Columbus, Ohio when I was about 17, 18 years old.
I grew up in Michigan, so I know the area.
Cool. Midwestern pride.
Hell yeah.
I bought a pod, and I had a Tascam 4-track recorder, and I bought an Alesis SR16 drum machine.
I got one of those too. And a pod.
They're great. I mean, surprisingly enough, it's not that different than digital setups are now. There was a lot of things in that era that you could do with that setup that you still do now when you fire up Logic and you use Superior Drummer and whatever, a guitar plugin. It's just sort of the same difference. But I started doing tape demos into the mid and late 90s, and I ended up moving to New York City in 1998 after having spent a year in Minneapolis. I moved to New York, and I just started circulating tape demos of the stuff that I was doing. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of whatever I was doing. There wasn't a lot of that going around. It was somewhere in between early Metallica, early Megadeth, and Sabbath. And in New York City, we had a lot of electronic bands at the time.
Okay.
Or if we had metal, it was, I'm not going to mention any names, but it was like the Britney Spears version of heavy metal. Nothing heavy about it, So the demos and the sort of, even though we were well past the tape trading days of heavy metal, that stuff was still kind of going on in the underground scene in New York a little, and that gave the band its legs a little. And from there, it sort of grew, and we signed with a label in New York, which would bring you to about like 2003, 4, 5. And that's a quick history of the band. We have 2 full-length releases on much larger labels, and then this latest release I released myself.
Hey, Mike, you were talking about, the early days there. That was right around the time, and George and I spoke about this a couple episodes back. What did you think about Napster at that time, and did you like it? And did you use it to possibly help spread the word of your band? As you know, the tape trading days were kind of a thing of the past.
That's a really good question. I remember having It's funny to even think about this now, but I remember having really hardcore moral dilemmas during Napster days when I got my first laptop, because it was like for the first time ever you could just sit down and get anything you wanted, and it actually made you stop and think I think Dave Mustaine's got enough money.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna grab his new record. And I was doing that stuff, as everyone was doing. But then all of a sudden, when I was making music, and I saw that it would take me 6 months to put 2 songs together properly into listenable form that I would let other human beings hear, it sort of changed my opinion of how that should all go down. I'm sort of somewhere in between. I'm definitely not Lars Ulrich, I thought that shit was completely insane. Some kind of monster. Here's a motherfucker selling millions of dollars in paintings because he's bored, going after poor people quote unquote, stealing his music, that's doing nothing but making his band bigger. All it's doing is selling more tickets for him, selling more Metallica CDs, T-shirts, whatever, and they couldn't see that. But at the same time, I also think, like, should music be free? Not really. There's got to be some support coming from somewhere, or guys like me can't do this,
Yeah, that's always been my thing. I have always seen the exposure, because my first exposure to you mentioned your early albums. Was it 2005 you released your Closing In album?
Yeah, it was 2005.
Yeah. I saw you in Jack's in Springfield, Virginia. I don't remember who you were opening for.
I remember that show well, yeah.
But I don't remember what tour that was, but I believe it was through a Napster service or a clone like that I had even heard of you prior to that show. So,
right.
In that aspect, it was great exposure, but also, by downloading it, whoever's taking money out of your pocket.
Right. And I think, what's funny though, is I think that time period, we have anybody that's still a musician that's still complaining about that kind of stuff is also still living in 2005, because we're way past that time period now. There's ways around that. There's ways. My band is never, thank God, going to be as big as, whoever. I'm taught, let's step outside of metal. I don't have to worry about Early Man becoming the next Radiohead,
Right.
But because of that, you have such a tight fan base that of course you can go to them and say, hey, please support me. Let's at least have some good goddamn music left on the planet. Let's have some riffs. Let's have some things, you guys that think like I do. Let's have some things that we can all share together, and those people will respond. It's funny, like, you don't need, what do I need as a fan base to actually live off of this band? Not a lot. Anywhere between 500 to 1,000 hardcore followers that are supporting me and what I'm doing, and I'm fine. I'll write riffs until I'm 95 years old all day long.
Now, us as metal fans, we are a passionate group. Do you think those same metal fans, though, you said you would rather have 500 or 1,000 passionate ones, what do you think they would do if, this new album does for something take off? And now you're playing, those 2,000 seat venues. And they say, oh, Early Man Mike is now selling out.
Yeah, you're always going to get that kind of backlash. I mean, it's a tough one, because as a musician, obviously your goal is, how many people can I get to hear the music? This is partially why when I released the new record, I chose to release it through Bandcamp. I chose to make it free for the first month. It's no longer free now. Now it's $6.66. But it's funny, because you're seeing guys that have a much bigger following than me use Bandcamp to do similar things. I noticed that Godflesh released their record through Bandcamp. I don't know if he did it exclusively, but basically all of the best, biggest perks and quickest, easiest way to get the record was through Bandcamp. That's veering off a little bit from whether or not it's free, but my point is just, there's avenues now where I can say, hey, go here and download this record for $5, and I keep 85% of the profit right away into, whatever, a PayPal account. If that fan base goes from 1,000 people to 100,000 people, it creates all kinds of new problems. I can't facilitate that myself anymore. Mm-hmm. I can't wake up at 8 a.m. and be like, let me make sure that Kip from Michigan has his EP. It's not possible. If that happens, I won't be able to write music anymore. So I think your original question falls under the category of, like, you can't please everybody. I'm certainly happy I love being the underdog. I'd rather be the smaller guy, mm-hmm. even on a tour. Let me play at 7:30 and blow the roof off the place, and make a 60-year-old Kronos actually try to look like he can still play bass, at 10:30 at night. That's not believe me, I love Venom. I'm just saying we did some tours with Venom, and we had an opening slot, and we were like, this is the greatest thing in the world. You play to a packed house at 7 p.m. By 8 o'clock, we're all wasted up the street eating cheeseburgers. This is amazing. So there's benefits to being the underdog. But of course, we've toured with bands. A band that comes to mind is a band, The Sword. They opened for us on our first tour. 3 years later, they're in an arena opening for Metallica. They're still the same guys. I know them all. They're all great guys. They haven't changed a bit, but they have numerous new fans. But then there's this sort of undercurrent of backlash against them because it's like, why didn't it happen to me? That's like asking why you didn't win the lottery. It happens to some bands, it doesn't to others.
It's kind of like I don't know if you read that piece. I can't remember his name. The guy from God Forbid put out a piece a couple months back about, why some of those new metal bands.
Doc Coyle.
Yeah, Doc put that thing about, why some of these new metal bands didn't make it and why bands like Killswitch Engage, for whatever reason, the spark found them and they made it.
Right.
But quickly going back to Bandcamp, with these crowdfunding websites like the Bandcamps or the Kickstarter, where you pretty much control your own product and put it out, what do you think about these larger, already established bands who might not have put out something in years, kind of encroaching on your territory?
Each circumstance is its own case, right? But I think what you're getting at is why.
Because it is my field that, hey, yes, most recent one that comes to mind, Obituary, did a successful Kickstarter campaign. I think they raised like 60 or 80 grand, something like that. To me, they're a band that I thought, hey, Kickstarter should not be for you.
I agree with that. I actually just saw, I don't know if you guys watch that show Portlandia, but I just saw there was something on that show that was kind of a jab at what you're talking about. Like major actors or actresses using Kickstarter to fund movies or whatever. It's like, it's the same difference. It's like you don't need that to do that. Like I actually need it. I actually took after Indiegogo and PayPal and everybody took their cut out of what we raised, I literally went with a stack of $100 bills to Sam Ash and bought recording gear. And I was like, okay, now we can get the show on the road. I don't think that's what Obituary did with their 80 grand.
No.
I doubt it. And I also think that there's something that seems like a little bit, I don't want to say sinister. That's a little too dramatic, but you get the feeling that there's more going on behind the scenes with a band that big. Again, I don't know their story, but I really do have a feeling that there's a lot of bands on Kickstarter, not just a feeling, I know of some, that are actually backed by labels. And the label is saying, go do a Kickstarter or go do an Indiegogo and let's at least get 10 grand going here. And then we'll put in the rest. That's bullshit, because a label has the juice to do anything. They could get you a song placed somewhere for 100 grand. They have that kind of power. They should be working with things from the ground up, as far as I'm concerned. But what happens? Everything gets homogenized. Everything gets taken over that starts in the underground. If it becomes cool, forget it. Everyone's going to do it. And that's exactly where the whole crowdfunding thing is right now. It's, in my opinion, it's over. I'd never do it again. It's already done,
Did you see the thing about Winter Sun? How they were doing some sort of crowdfunding, or they wanted to? They're on Nuclear Blast. And originally Nuclear Blast was like, no, you can't do that. And I don't know, it was a big deal or whatever, but eventually...
Yeah, I saw like a little bit of, I read a couple like boards about it. I know I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
And then whatever, they got it worked out. They're getting ready to do the crowdfunding, and the main Winter Sun guy put up their plans for what they're going to do, and he wants to build this studio so that they have somewhere to work. And he put up a diagram, and there was a sauna in it. And people were like losing their shit, going, why are we paying for you to have a sauna? Make us some fucking music.
I mean, that's exactly, Exactly. That says it all right there. The other thing is, if you want to build a studio, that's great, and I think that's noble, but I don't think that's what we started crowdfunding for.
Yeah.
Like, I think you can also go get a night stocking job at Walmart for a year, put 15 grand back, and then build your studio next year. Like, because what's going to happen is all you're going to do, we all know what's going on. You're going to juice the costs for this bundle is $150 and we'll sign it in the blood of our grandmother, whatever the fuck it is. And it just gets to the point where you're like, dude, come on, man. Like, all we want is 8 to 10 songs that rip. It doesn't really take that much.
Yeah.
We all know you can go into a studio for somewhere between 5 to 10 grand and do that. Or you can do what I did, teach yourself how to do it all with 5 microphones and a couple laptops, and it's the same difference. So the some of that backlash is, I think they deserve it,
Yeah. I noticed that you seem to be doing most of the instruments on this new album, which, by the way, is called Thank God You've Got the Answers for Us All. So what's the story there? What was your instrument of choice when you first started playing, and what led to you picking up other instruments, and just how much is you on this new album?
It's pretty much, it's all me. It's a lot me. I don't want to take anything away from the drummer, John, who tracked all the drums, but I did also sort of write all the drum parts as well. But you guys will get a kick out of this. I actually I come from a very scary religious background family.
Nice.
The whole entire family is Jehovah's Witnesses.
And that's actually why we have you on this podcast. This is actually a Jehovah Witness podcast. It all comes full circle now.
Anyway.
Yes, you're at my door right now with a watchtower, and it's all a big joke.
The bikes are locked up down the street.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, I come from a crazy religious family, and they thought it would be a brilliant idea to have me start playing violin, which I'm not against, when I was in first grade. And so I picked a violin up, and I was pretty decent with it until I got to about, I want to say it was around like 5th or 6th grade. I kind of started looking around, and I was like, this is really dorky, to be a violin guy, which of course is like a horrible thing to say because that's not true.
But it is. Come
on. When you're at that age, I was just like, you got to be kidding me.
I started off with a trumpet in a denim sack. Okay, and do you think my school had actually trumpet in the band? No, they had the little ones, the cornets. Yeah, so I was the kid with the trumpet in the denim sack. That didn't last but 2 weeks.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Those are like, I think it's great that they do that. Those are like gateway drugs for those of us that become actual musicians, at that age.
Yeah.
And of course, there were guys I went to a tiny little school in Ohio. I remember there being a guy in there who just ripped on violin. He was unbelievable, like complete virtuoso, But it kind of made me think, like, I don't think this is what I don't see myself doing this. And I, through a crafty series of lies and deceptive Bible quotes and whatever it needed to take, I got my hands on a guitar. My dad bought me a guitar. And I remember I learned Proud Mary was the first song I learned. And I was blown away because the guitar has frets on it. And obviously a violin doesn't. Right. And I was like, this is a goddamn piece of cake. And then I took I think 2 guitar lessons from somebody. Ironically enough, this probably really shaped me. At the time, I didn't know it. I took a little bit of time off from guitar, but I started to revisit it in my later teens. And there was a guy, his name was George, who was a huge Maiden fan. And he was a guitar instructor, and his whole thing was he wanted to teach me some riffage. And he taught me a couple bar chords, basically off of Killers. Like, here's an example of what he's doing, and then here's how it's done. And then I went home and did that and I, at the time, didn't even have a distortion pedal. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was hooked from that point on. But it's funny because I got a late start, much later than anybody else that you would consider an even remotely decent guitar player, period. I don't think I really went for it and picked the instrument up properly until I was about 19 years old, which is odd, you know?
Yeah, we will play some of your songs later in the podcast. For the listeners out there who haven't heard you, your riffs are fucking killer. Do you find it rough this day and age to, because me and you are different in this, obviously, because you know how to play. You and I listen to, metal. I guess where I'm going with this question is, are there any riffs that you just sit there and you try and write and you're like, I've heard that before. And is it a struggle for you to come up with these killer riffs that you do play?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to. I'm sorry, did I just cut you off?
That's all right. I sort of was trying to squeeze in there. I was just going to say, did you know that one time I actually wrote Electric Funeral? Then I found out that somebody had already done it.
You know what's funny? Yes, that happens. But let me try to give you the quick version of this story. So, from a religious family who was obviously guarding me from the evils of Ozzy Osbourne and Randy Rhoads, right, as I was growing up, which was easy to do in a small town. I did not have that much exposure to music. As luck and fortune and as the fate of the universe would have it, my grandma had an accidental late son when she was 46 years old. And so he's my uncle, and he's 6 or 7 years younger than me.
Already.
Yeah. So this created this interesting setup when we would go visit. My grandparents lived in Dayton, Ohio, which is about 2 hours from where I grew up. So we would go visit Grandpa and Grandma, and all of a sudden I had a little uncle to hang out with.
That needs to be your next band's name.
Exactly.
Little uncle.
Amen. But this was during, I was young, so this is during kind of picture this happening in the 80s during like the Star Wars period, all of that. And I was allowed to have a little bit of exposure to pop culture, but nothing like him. He was just a normal kid. So anytime he got to go to Grandma's house, I got to play with Star Wars toys. I got to play with G.I. Joes. I got, my life opened up for 2 days when we were there for the weekend. Well, when we entered our teens, when I was 19, he was about, 13, 14 years old. He started playing drums. And he started a metal band with his friends at school called Silence. And they did covers of all the classic stuff. Mainly, they were doing a lot of Megadeth, Metallica, and Pantera covers. And what happened was my grandma, who was sort of your typical slightly heavy set, bifocals, literally crocheting every day type of a grandma. We show up once when I was about 18 or 19 years old. She opens the door and she's dressed in black, has a Megadeth shirt on, has lost 75 pounds, and has like dyed black hair.
What?
And looks like 20 years younger.
What?
And I was like, of course I was like, fuck yes. I was like, are you kidding me? Like my parents were horrified. They're like, what has happened? So basically what happened was, this obviously you guys know the drill. This happens with a lot of parents. The son, my uncle, had started a band that was playing locally a lot in Dayton, and she wanted to support him. And she just got sucked in and taken by the power that is heavy metal.
The power of the riff.
The power of the riff. She was literally taken by that at, 50 years of age.
That's awesome.
And so what happened for me is that first visit, that was the first time ever that I heard a live band play in someone's basement. And you guys know how Midwestern 14-year-olds can be with their heavy metal. These kids were crushing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it might as well have been Pantera in the basement. Playing Walk over and over and over again. And for me, I was like, and at that age, I was like, okay, I've been shown Jesus. I've been shown the possibility of college. I've been shown go get a job. What I'm hearing right now just altered my life.
Yeah.
Just amazing, like unbelievable. So what happened was the kid that was their lead guitar player was like, what's the deal? So you've been playing guitar a little? And I was like, yeah, I've been playing a little, but not like that. Like that shit's insane. And he was like, well, a lot of it's got to do with this thing called a distortion pedal. Imagine this is real. This actually happened. I was 19 years old and I was like, what is it? He's like, it's this little box and you plug the one cable in here and then you plug out to the amp and then now it sounds like this. And I was like, oh my God. He took pity on me. This is so beautiful. Like, only in the metal world, right?
Yeah.
Took pity on me and was like, here, put this in your back pocket, and gave me a heavy metal distortion pedal. I'm sure you have seen or know of that pedal.
I think I have a few lying around.
And I took it back home, and my parents were like, what is going on in the bedroom now? Like, holy shit. And that really altered my whole, I was beginning to get a little more serious about playing guitar. But between having just been shown Iron Maiden riffs and then that experience happening where Heavy Metal Grandma entered the picture, and it in my mind, it kind of became like, oh, it's okay. Because before that, it was like, that was a taboo subject and also a very look down your nose upon profession or choice in life. But that changed me forever. Still to this day, when I go into an early man practice and we fire it up and it really gets rolling, that same feeling comes up that I got that day that I first saw those guys jamming. Same thing. It's right there again.
Like us as guys sit around, we all talk about the first girl that we all hooked up with. Your story is even better because it's the first pedal that opened your eyes to this whole world in this first show.
Exactly. And it was the next 6 months were like, talk about a good time. This is before, it's funny you would bring Napster up because this is before you could do stuff like that. We're talking now about like probably early to mid 90s. So I had to find ways to sneak, Judas Priest records, Dio records, Sabbath records, Megadeth records in and out of my house and car in a very religious household. Anybody catches a hold of some early Dio record artwork that's trying to convert their son to Christianity is not stoked.
No. I growing up, I had one of my best friends. His mom was Jehovah's Witness, and she would not let him have any of the music that we were listening to. And whenever she would find any of his cassette tapes, she would throw them out.
Yeah.
So he started stealing her religious tapes, bringing them to me, and I would dub metal albums over top of them.
So been there, done that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
So they were in disguise.
Everything I had to do would be in disguise. It's funny. I would go buy. You could get a lot of stuff from friends or whatever, but I would, there's certain, obviously, like a record that comes to mind that was happening at that time that I will say now, looking back over my life, is probably the record that, in conjunction with that other story, changed me forever, is Countdown to Extinction by Megadeth.
Great
because album. I knew it was coming out. I didn't know what it was going to sound like, but I was like armed with like, I know what heavy metal is now, motherfuckers. And this record is coming out. What's it going to sound like? And then it sounded like that. I was like, holy shit, this is the greatest. I want to be buried in a sea of this record for the rest of my life. But I remember going and buying that and having to dub it onto like a regular looking old tape, in order to listen to it. Because had that artwork or that name even been found anywhere near anything I was doing, I probably would have been castrated. Who knows? I have no idea.
Now, would you and Heavy Metal Grandma get in arguments about like who was better, Dio or Ozzy era Sabbath?
Yeah, we would talk about, and it's funny. Like, I know you're probably joking. We would actually talk about that stuff.
That is badass.
Because she decided to start taking guitar lessons, and she actually became pretty good.
Nice.
She passed away about a month before September 11th happened. Actually, I went back to her funeral in Ohio, but she was buried with her guitar.
That
Wow.
is awesome.
So it stuck with her through her whole, the rest of her life. But she was also taking guitar lessons, and she was known around the city as Heavy Metal Grandma. And
awesome.
we would talk about that kind of stuff all the time. Like, I don't know, there's some Dio Sabbath that is heavy duty. Let's not fuck around, but just amazing, because literally 5 years prior, she's crocheting in the corner and we're playing with G.I. Joes, so
Wow.
it was intense.
It's the greatest story I've ever heard.
Yeah. All right. I know this is a rather stock question, but particularly now that I've heard all of this, I'm really curious to know, like, what were your earliest influences? What were the metal bands that really turned you on and made you say, I want to do this?
I think earliest influences were the big three that turned me. I guess it should be big four that turned me were Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, and Slayer. Those were the four that I first heard that I was like, oh my God, like, this is like, this is life. If you remove this, I'm jumping off of a bridge. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But then you know how it works. Like, when especially if because I could technically be considered kind of like your typical middle class suburban 19-year-old white kid at that point. I had different problems than the average guy, but I was going to be listening to a lot of whatever you would want to. A lot of people would call that mall metal. I don't agree with that, but stuff that you could walk into any record store at that time and buy.
Right.
So then, after I got into those bands, I started digging, a little deeper into things like, Dio, Maiden, stuff that wasn't quite as pumped as those bands were at the time. But that led into when I started riffing a lot. Interestingly enough, I got into a lot of like hard rock as well, like UFO, Uriah Heep, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, classics.
But was also very blown away. I guess the thing for me is I was taken by. Here's a song that changed me. I was like, okay, there's something going on between what Mustaine does and what was happening here. You listen to a song like Sails of Sharon by the Scorpions. That's like, there's something there that's like early hard rock meets metal songwriting that at the time I was beginning to learn to play guitar and write wasn't happening that much. Even like the production quality of it, the whole thing. So those kind of things altered my songwriting ability, and also just the importance I put on, it's got to be a song. For me personally, it's got to be, I want an intro, I want a verse and a chorus with a hook that I can't get over, that goes into this, that goes into that. Any band that was doing that type of stuff caught my attention. Even at the time, like, I always thought Alice in Chains was a killer metal band. Yeah. I had no idea why. When I would watch MTV Headbangers Ball, I was like, why are they getting grouped in with these horrible Seattle bands? Like, this is a heavy metal band. And also kind of felt the same way about like early Soundgarden stuff. But I liked a lot of that stuff because it was songwriting. So those were definitely influences. And then I also do come from a very DIY punk background. Love Black Flag, love Minor Threat, all that stuff. So it's a little bit of a ball of all of that, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. My favorite thing about you, I know we talked about, your riffs and stuff like that. I actually think your vocals are probably the best thing about you and your project that you do. I know, you've heard it asked before, and it's been mentioned numerous times in write-ups and stuff. You have a very Ozzy, early Ozzy kind of sounding voice.
Right.
I know, some things we're kind of born with how we sound, but did you kind of consciously go for that in your singing style?
I think to be honest with you, I don't know. I know that I definitely wasn't trying to sound like that.
Yeah.
And one thing that sort of opened my eyes is after Closing In came out, I started going to, there's a really famous vocal teacher in New York who's amazing, who deals with a lot of metal guys. Her name is Melissa Cross. And I started going to her. Her whole big thing is, I know she works with like Randall from Lamb of God and like all these like heavy hitters in order to get them to be able to growl properly every night and not lose their voice. Because there is a technique to do that where you have to sing from the stomach in order to not rip your throat apart if you're doing that style of singing.
Right. And
I started going to her because I started losing my voice a lot when we were on tour, because it's very, as a smaller band, look, it's great for Bruce Dickinson. He's got a crew of 3,000 people and he flies his own 747 to each show, right? That's easy to sing against that backdrop. But if you're early man and you're in a club playing to 35 people, I have to compete vocally with 5 full stacks,
Yeah.
And it becomes difficult. You have to learn, you have to train yourself how to sing properly and not blow your voice out. And I started going to her, and she mentioned to me, she was like, it's kind of funny because actually she did some tests with a piano and made me sing some few things. She was like, you're actually a baritone, but you sing when you go to this certain place in your throat, this thing just comes out and it has that Rob Halford Ozzy sound to it. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And it's the first time that I became like extremely aware of it. And to be honest with you, even a little bit on this new record, or a little bit on a lot of the stuff that you'll hear, I've got a lot more stuff lined up coming up very soon. I make sort of conscientious efforts now to sing in different keys and whatever, and try to pay a little more attention to that. But brutal honesty, like early on, I just wasn't paying attention. Subliminally, was it there? It had to have been. You can hear the influence in everything that's happening, particularly on Closing In. But
not to say that the early stuff sounded cheap. It just, the early stuff just, I get to back up what you're saying. The early stuff just almost sounds like you just hit the record button and just went.
Right. Exactly. And you know why? Because that's basically what we did. I mean, the beauty of that era is it was like, I don't know why, but we became, for some reason, unwisely for whoever that was, because I'm sure he's down about $500,000 for making this decision. But for some reason, everybody in the music industry in 2004 decided we were going to be the next thing coming out of New York City. So everything we did was hurry up, get them recorded. And there was a lot of pressure on us to make demos and to make records. And it was a stressful time for me because the proper amount of thought, which then translates into whether or not I'm getting my actual idea across to people musically, was being stepped on. Because everything was just like, oh, it needs to be raw. Just go, man. It's like total like Nirvana meets, everything's got to be packaged and labeled.
Yeah.
It's almost like Nirvana meets a retro Metallica and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like 3 months ago, I was alone with a 4-track in a shitty apartment in Brooklyn, like writing riffs. Now all of a sudden, like we're putting all these stamps on it, like, and I'd have people emailing me like, Mike, I can really hear the new wave of British heavy metal influence in what you're doing. And I literally had to call someone and be like, what's new wave of British heavy metal? What is this guy talking about? It was awesome. It opened up a whole new, I was like, oh, all these bands I've never heard of? Wow, amazing. And we sound just like them. This is incredible. But there was never a conscientious effort made to sound like that. It kind of goes back to what you were saying, like, you wrote a guitar line that existed. A similar situation.
Now, you just touched on it there. in those early man days, I'm talking '05, '06, when I saw you on tour, the press for you guys at that time, I saw you on a whole bunch of websites and all that. And please, I don't mean any disrespect by this. I kind of saw the talk of you guys go dark. Not saying that's a bad thing. Is that because you kind of went off doing a different thing for a while? You got a job, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically what happened was I was never prepared. Everything that happened with the band in New York, I was completely unprepared for, and I was just a novice to what was about to happen when we signed our names to a contract.
Okay.
When I moved to, I had been in bands all my life, and going back to the heavy metal grandma story, nothing makes me happier than recording a good jam with killer riffs in it. I've been doing that for forever. And that's kind of like, that was my version of, a 75-year-old man's garden in his backyard. That's what I did. That's how I relaxed. I cranked up the 4-track and did my thing. And I wasn't really prepared for, given the situation with my, I'm sorry?
No, I'm just going to say, I didn't want to take the words out of your mouth. Kind of the limelight you were starting to get?
Exactly. And I wasn't prepared for, I had a lot of family problems at the time that were due to the religion, this made them 50,000 times worse. The fact that all of a sudden we were literally on MTV, still in a time when it actually kind of mattered, and I wasn't prepared for that at all. And not only was I not prepared for that, if you think I wasn't prepared for it, let's talk about the other guys that were in the band at the time. Like what starts to happen is there's these things called girls, and they start coming out of the woodwork as soon as your face is on a magazine and on MTV. And other guys in the band, and I'm not shit talking by any means. I'm still good friends with every past guy who's been in the band. They're all great dudes, but it was too much too soon. It was like we went from being, hey, we got a pretty good demo here. Let's play a couple basement shows, and maybe we'll play over here at this club and over here. We played at this club called The Hole once, and there was literally like, I'm going to say about 1,500 to 2,000 people. They had to close the street down trying to get in to see us into a club that holds maybe 500 people.
Wow.
That's too much buzz. Like, if you want to say like, whereas the regular musician will be like, I really want to make it. I really want to see what that feels like to make it. After that night, I made it. Yeah. I did it all. I was the king of New York City, and I had only been on the scene for 3 months. It was like, what is going on? So, to be quite honest with you, the band peaked in the biggest city in the world so hard, so quickly, that it was almost like, and maybe at my own fault a little bit, but particularly for some other people in the band, when you actually have to go out and do the work, in other words, go on a 120-day tour, and you're the opening band of 4 bands, and you feel like you kind of already did it, as far as you're concerned, maybe not as far as the world is concerned, that's a grueling thing to go through.
Astonishing me, and that was actually one of the questions, probably the biggest question I wanted to ask you today, is because, going back to my original question, with the talk of you guys was, the buzz was huge, and you fast forward right now to, November of 2014, and you see the sound that you guys had when you started, the sound that you guys have evolved into now is kind of what in the metal scene now is getting revived and is actually getting big now.
Right.
And you guys were at the forefront of that 10 years before these bands are doing it now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it makes it it's an interesting position for me personally to be in. Let's just put it that way.
But talking to you, it doesn't sound like you have any resentment or you're not bummed out about it. No, woe is me.
No way. Are you kidding me? I'm from Marion, Ohio. I got out of hell.
Yeah.
Like any success that I can have on any level. the fact that, like, last night we just did a Halloween EP, and I was working with my girlfriend, actually, who's been working her ass off with me to get these orders shipped out. How many guys can say this? I paid my rent in LA this month by releasing a Halloween EP. How rare is that?
That's nice.
That's amazing. But hundreds of orders to ship out. And I was sitting there last night looking through, like, we got orders going to Sweden, Japan, Germany, Peoria, Illinois, Mexico City, Australia. That, to me, I judge my own success. I'm just competing with myself, if you will. Like, I'm not really paying that much attention to what's going on out there. And for me, I'm having raging success. If I'm not playing tambourine in Mastodon yet, oh well, so be it. But I'm very happy with where I'm at right now. But you're right. It's humorous, and it's funny for me because people will discover us, and kids, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids who, it's not their fault, but they'll send me emails like, "You guys sound exactly like these 8 bands," and I want to be like, "Oh, you mean the 8 bands that we inspired to pick up a guitar? Yeah, we do sound like them,
All right. Well, let's talk about the new album a little bit. Thank God you've got the answers for us all. I sense a little sarcasm there, and particularly after hearing your backstory.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go ahead and call it. That's a straight shot at Jehovah's Witnesses right there. But yeah, it's it's a really important record to me because over the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, I reached an age where I had a decision to make. I was either going to quit doing this and join the ranks of the rest of the world, God forbid, or something had to change so that I made this sort of, even from just a financial aspect, so that I made it possible for myself to continue releasing records and keep the pedal to the floor, And so I realized that I really needed to learn recording, engineering, all that stuff much better than I had known it. Believe me, I'm a badass on a Tascam 4-track, but it doesn't mean much in 2014. So this record it's an important one for me because I really had to push through. I convinced myself numerous times throughout the making of the record that I wasn't going to finish it, or that I didn't want to finish it, or it wasn't what I was trying to say, or I hadn't recorded something well enough or whatever. And I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what? This is fucking heavy metal. Again, let's go back to those tape trading days. Some of that shit was done on one mic hanging from a ceiling. It's not about that. It's about, does the song have a soul or not? And every song on this record has a major importance to me from that aspect. Already, since I recorded this, I've become 10 times the engineer, producer, or whatever since this was laid down. But that, to me, makes it special. Like it says on the Bandcamp page, recorded in various, garages, closets, attics, you name it, over the course of a year and a half. So it is what it is, but I'm very proud of it.
And it's a great album.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Thank God is not as thrashy as Death Potion was.
Right.
Not that Death Potion was super thrashy, but it had a bit more of a thrashy sound.
Right.
And Thank God sounds a little more laid back, groovy Sabbath kind of thing. What sort of evolution have you gone through since Death Potion?
I think what happened was I think that I felt like I love Death Potion. It's such a killer record. I love the riffs are like out of control. But I was pushing myself at the time we recorded Death Potion. We recorded that record with Jack Endino, who's a total genius. So absolutely love. Just becoming friends with him, recording that record was worth the whole experience. Period. But I was pushing myself to sort of outdo myself with thrash riffs. What happened 6 months after the record was made is the label sat on it and didn't come out for 2 years until after it was recorded. And I didn't listen to it for quite some time because of that, and it actually became a little bit of a thorn in my side, obviously, when a label will sit on a record that long.
There's nothing you can do to kind of force them?
No.
We tried. There is a little bit, and we tried, but, with a label, the bottom line is money. It's a business, and I'm not knocking them for that. That's what they're there for. Music is music, and the music industry is the music industry. And for them, they wanted to line us up on a big tour before we released that record. And basically what happened is I had lost interest and lost the financial ability to say yes and no to certain tours by the time they were ready to release the record. So it never really lined up properly. And it's the sort of evolution from going from that record to Thank God, I think is more of, you hear, ironically enough, it's almost like there's more pain and anger in Thank God than there is in Death Potion. And I think it's because it's a little bit of an exorcism of like, I want to try this and it's okay. I want to try this sort of, I'm just going to keep, you look at a song like The Longer the Life.
Yeah.
That song came out of me revisiting Bleach by Nirvana and just having my mind blown, thinking like, he's not doing anything. He's not playing anything. He keeps playing the same note over and over and over again. And they're like the greatest raw, like shitty punk rock songs of all time.
Yeah.
They're like unbelievable. But, 5 years ago, I couldn't really bring that to the table because the label is going to say, no. We got to keep you, everybody views you as mini Metallica. So if you don't follow that path, then we're going to lose record sales. And at that time, I was totally down to play ball with that. Now I am the complete opposite. Now I would rather on purpose show people like, hey, I've got diversity you don't even know about. Well, but it's funny. You might see me do a record that sounds even thrashier than Death Potion 6 months from now. It's just something I had to get out on this one.
Are you at a point now that you can, because you just mentioned it, are you at a point now where you can say, hey, no, we're not going to do that shitty tour with this? Not saying, we're talking trash about any bands, but I'm not going to do that tour. I'm not going to slug around the country and, do this.
I think you just described the AM of every one of my days that I live right now. Okay. It's all about making wise decisions. I just read, I'm not going to say who said it because it's not a metal guy, but this is the most genius thing I've read in quite some time. I just read a quote of somebody that said, the most perfect way to ruin a friendship is to be in a band with somebody. And the most, even more perfect way to ruin a band is to go on tour. Those are the two truest statements I can possibly think of to explain, at least from my perspective, why this model that for some reason we still follow of putting a band out in a van, making them sleep in Walmart parking lots every night for no money on tour, and I'm speaking particularly of metal bands, putting them out on the road for 8 to 10 months a year so that they all want to kill each other. Nobody has a dime under the guise that they're going to quote unquote make it and eventually be on the cover of Rolling Stone is an old system that we shouldn't be following anymore. So for me, I want to choose wisely across the board, the songwriting, the tours, all of it. If that makes any sense.
It totally makes sense. You see that news that came out, what was it, a couple weeks ago about no artist has reached platinum level of success, selling albums this year. And I think that just factors into the whole level that the whole music industry as a whole has just changed. And since it's changed so much and you now have seen it, that you know what you can do and can't do, and you're not going to get fucked over anymore.
Exactly. And the important thing, here's the most crucial part for me. The important thing is to keep a positive attitude, which as metalheads is not our strong suit, But the important thing is to not buy into, listen, music is music. I sit down I make it. It's got to be the best possible riff for that moment in time. It's got to be a song about something. I choose the subject matter. I get it down, and I'm done. That process has absolutely nothing to do with the music industry. So there's no reason for me to tie the two together and let the latter, the music industry, disrupt what I'm doing with my music. That's all that happened with Early Man for a decade. We just let these guys push us this way. This manager tell us to play with these guys. Your hair should be 4 times longer. It should be shorter. Wear bell bottoms. The jeans aren't tight enough. Which metal shirt is it going to be? It's important. They'll see it.
It's
Fuck
really,
all of that.
It is really that fucking deep.
Yeah, it's
wow.
that deep. It's that deep. And these are coming from people that you think that's not happening with. You know, believe me, there's a guy with a tape measure measuring Kerry King's chains. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yep, they're exactly where they should be. It's that deep, and it's ridiculous. So for me, I just try to say, I'm really trying to do something here that I honestly think has never been done. What I'm going to try to do is to be more prolific than anyone you've ever seen. Because I've taught myself how to record. I've taught myself how to mix, master, produce, do the whole thing, whether that's in a studio or whether I have to do it by bringing my gear to someone's house, whatever it's going to take. Since I've taught myself how to do that, I can now just go. And there's no reason I can't release at least 2, 3, 4 records, full lengths, a year at this point. There's absolutely no reason for that. This record is the sort of breaking open of the dam of that possibility happening. But that, to me, is exciting. You know, you have all these guys right now that are all over Blabbermouth and Facebook and Twitter. The record industry, Kiss says even the record is dead. Rock and roll's dead. Get the fuck out of here. Sit down and write a song. It's only dead if you kill it, right?
Yeah.
So it's, if you're making music, if you're putting it out there, if there's avenues for me to, literally 3 weeks ago, at my own birthday party, I just had an idea like, I wonder if we could get a Halloween EP, a 3-song EP, out to the world on Halloween Day. It happened. Do you think that would happen in 2005?
No.
You know, we'd still be having meetings about, what color should the logo be, though, in Japan? What do you think, you know? It's just ridiculous. It's too much for somebody who's truly focused on their music. It's too much for them to deal with. So, you know, I think that's the real reason why you saw at least me over the past 4 or 5 years just kind of lay low. Because I said, you know what, I want to take this seriously, but I need a new business plan for me. Something that works for me, you know, outside of that realm.
You know, in this lifetime, no one's going to look out for any of us. And that, just talking to you this last, 40 minutes or so, we've been talking to you, your intelligence really comes through, and it sounds like you're not going to be fucked over anymore. You're taking the ball in your own hands, ball in your court, you're running with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're right. But what's funny is we, particularly as musicians, just to get this point across to anybody that's listening to your show as a musician, stop listening to these fucking people. Stop listening to rich people. Stop listening to them. Stop buying into it. They're all completely full of shit. Anybody that comes along and offers you anything that doesn't have something that, massively boosts your career, where you can see it, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. This guy wants to do this and whatever. You should avoid it like the plague, That we have examples in our history of guys, you can go back to guys like Johnny Cash selling records out of his trunk. There's a reason for it. There's a reason that system works. Forget about, being on the cover of fucking Terrorizer or whatever. Don't worry about that shit. Just put a business plan together that says, like, can I pay my rent and can I avoid the wide road that the rest of society is on, and continue to do this by keeping my very small, tight fan base happy and connected with them. What I'm doing is working like a charm right now. So I wouldn't change anything, but I would definitely, I agree with you. You get to a point where you're here's the problem. Most guys at my age and at my point that I'm at right now, what do? They just quit. Yep. You know, they quit.
Yeah.
They're done. You don't hear anything from them anymore. There's hundreds, maybe even thousands of amazing records gone because of that. We'll never hear them. And so for me, I just kind of came to a fork in the road where I was like, nah, not mine. You motherfuckers are going to have to hear my riffs till I'm 90. That's just how it's going to work.
Excellent.
You know? So it's definitely a new a new approach for me over the past 6 months to year. But I'm excited and I'm thrilled that guys like yourselves have picked up on it and like the record.
Question for you. One last thing. In this year alone, again, we've lost, some musical greats. We lost Dave from Guar.
Right.
Just this past week, Wayne from Static X died.
Right.
Have you or have any words of advice for these guys out there living this crazy drug-fueled alcohol, infused
Don't do
life?
drugs.
I do have advice. Nobody, going back to what we were discussing earlier with me being from New York and really being at the top of the king of New York for a while Early Man was blowing up. Nobody did more coke. Nobody drank more. Nobody was crazier than me for a long time. Push it to almost nearly a decade. But I went completely sober about 2 years ago, coming off of a really gnarly experience I had with all of the aforementioned problems. And it's really the only way to go. I mean, it brings your focus. I'm just talking about, I'm not one of these guys who's like going to tell people not to drink or none of that. People should do what they want to do and make their lives enjoyable. But it's just unfortunate as rock stars, like the guys you just mentioned, we buy into a story that's bullshit, that we are all supposed to be out there living like Keith Richards or Lemmy every day, and it doesn't work for all of us. We're not all built the same. So once you're not 22 anymore, one line of that shit or a couple extra beers can put you in the grave. And it's unfortunate. So I would say, to anybody out there, be careful. Don't overdo it. And also don't think you have to do any of it. Go to work, write a business plan. If your choices are buy an 8-ball of Coke or write a business plan for your band, write the business plan. That's my advice.
Indeed. So we're planning to play a couple songs here on the podcast.
Cool.
And first up, we're going to play Black Rains Are Falling. Would you like to intro that, say anything about it before?
That song is about the first group of firefighters that responded at Chernobyl when it blew up in, I think, 86, for those that may or may not be familiar with that situation. But the coolest thing about this song is through the crowdfunding campaign that we ran, all of the solos of the song are fans. It's 3 different guys. There's 2 solos that happen in the middle, and then there's one that happens at the end. That's not me. Those are longtime Early Man fans from, in some cases, over a decade ago that got to play on the record on what I think is one of the best, if not the best song on the record.
Excellent. All right, we're going to play that for you now. Black Rains Are Falling.
Nuclear sky. glow of death is seeping in, frozen in time like plastic men. Black rains are falling under nuclear skies, lies, skies, lies.
All right, we're here again with Mike Conte from Early Man, and we're going to play you another song from the new album, Thank God You've Got the Answers for Us All. This song is called The Longer the Life. What can you tell us about this one, Mike?
It's probably, I think this might be my favorite song on the record. It's the first song that I recorded for the record, but I think musically what I was going for was a lot of constraint. I wanted simplicity. And lyrically, it's just sort of born out of, I'm ultimately a Midwestern guy living in LA. In LA where everybody's trying to live forever and, juice and work out and do all things that I can't stand. So the main line in the song is, the longer the life, the more that they will bleed, which is basically just saying, what are you even trying to do with yourselves? Why do you want the extra 20 years if it's going to be being an orange bodybuilder that lives in LA like a douchebag? So that's the gist of it.
All right, well, we're here at the end of the episode, so we're going to play that last song, and that'll be it for this week. Thanks a lot, Mike, for being on the show.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is The Longer the Life. We'll see you next time.
Selfless as I sat inside your world, or was I just sitting inside of my tomb? Hard to say, decay can't take it, hold so